Hey there, it's time for the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tatiana Show. I'm joined today by Josh Shigala from Voltoro. Hey, Josh, how's it going?
Tatiana, I'm doing wonderful. It's another wonderful summer. It's the 2020 weird summer in Berlin, but it's beautiful and warm, and yeah, it's gorgeous. So I'm glad to join you on this most important show with a most important guest, I might add.
Yes. Well, okay. So we've got Lyn on the show. She's been on the show so many times. For people who are not familiar with Lyn Ulbricht, she is the mother of Ross Ulbricht, the defendant in the Silk Road trial. That has been, a real core thing that's in the story of Bitcoin. She and I have been friends for a very long time. I've obviously been an advocate for Ross. I've met Ross. I've talked about my wonderful experiences with him in many different speeches and stuff. But I wanted to touch base with her today and get an update, maybe introduce some new people to that story because there's still definitely some misconceptions and kind of relate it back to what's going on with this whole crazy year overall. So without any further ado, thank you so much, Lyn, for joining us once again on the show, ladies and gentlemen. Lyn Ulbricht.
Oh, always a pleasure, Tatiana. Always
Thank you.
fun. Yeah.
Great. So we're happy to speak with you. Even though, of course, times are a little bit tough right now, but you've been going through it for years because you've been fighting to free Ross, right? We've all been fighting to free Ross. He has a lot of supporters all around the world. You have close to 500,000 signatures on a change.org petition to get him a pardon. But before I kind of list the different credentials, maybe you can give us a bit of a mother's perspective as to what happened, what went wrong with the Silk Road, and what can be done with Ross to help him.
Well, I mean, just as a quick overview of what happened, Ross was basically in graduate school and became involved in the Ron Paul campaign of 2008. He brought Ron Paul to Penn State, and he became very passionate about liberty and free markets. He started studying Austrian economics and reading all those people, and just became totally immersed in this all of this thought, and really wanted to introduce people to free markets. He felt that people didn't really understand true free markets, and so he actually created a video game where people could experience free markets, and he almost got it published. He talked to different people but didn't, and so then he turned to the internet and created a website online marketplace called Silk Road. And the Silk Road was very strictly based on the non-aggression principle of voluntary interaction. So the idea was that if two people wanted to exchange something, that was their business. They could do it as long as it didn't hurt a third party. So, for example, something like child porn that obviously hurts a child, or stolen property that hurts the person whose property it is. That was not allowed on Silk Road. And I've had that corroborated by actually one of the top admins, Curtis Green, who said they would spend hours every day purging the site of these things. And it just wasn't okay. However, drugs were allowed because it was considered a free choice. And that's a very basic libertarian idea. It's not, it was basically a libertarian site. And so drugs were allowed. The most commonly exchanged drug was user amounts of cannabis, which of course is legal in many places now. And so for that, Ross was never convicted or accused of selling drugs himself or being, but it was the fact that he created this platform and other people did it. So he was held responsible for everything on the site that happened. and his charges were based on that. And then they also threw in a kingpin charge at the last minute, basically saying a website host is a kingpin. It's like saying Jeff Bezos is a kingpin and I'm part of his organization and he controls me because I buy on Amazon. I mean, it was really a stretch, but they gave him one of his life sentences is for that. So now Ross is serving a double life sentence for plus 40 years for some other minor charges, with no parole. He's a first-time offender, totally nonviolent. Every charge is nonviolent, and it has no chance of parole. He'll be starting his 8th year in October. So this is where he is. He's in a maximum security prison, totally nonviolent, peaceful guy. And I've been working, and so have others, many people in our family and supporters and people close to the family, steadfastly for years to right this wrong and correct this situation. Yeah.
One of the biggest things that always comes up with Ross, and I like to just get it straight out there because it's every single time it's on the forums, and you know what I'm going to say.
I do.
Is that this murder for hire thing,
right?
Which he was never charged for.
Nope.
It was a trumped up charge, and then it was just suddenly dropped. But what happened, and I really know why this happened, was because I followed this case. I followed this hook right from the beginning when it was launched to all the way to when it happened and onward. And really, the moniker, the avatar of Dread Pirate Roberts, had this amazing peaceful writings all from the start, all about non-aggression principle, all about peaceful parenting even, and all sorts of philosophical writings that would come out from the guy. And it was this fascinating thing because here we were, these cypherpunks and these crazy weirdos playing with this magic internet money, with this big dreams of philosophical dreams, and I knew when he got busted, I thought he's going to have because he had such a large following of peaceful protesters that would have backed him up. But as soon as they put that charge, everyone turned their back, faced the other way, and that is exactly what they wanted. And I knew that doesn't make any sense. None of this makes sense. And of course it didn't make sense because they didn't charge it. They dropped the charges. It never went through. But everyone just keeps trumping that up. Every time you talk about Free Ross, it's like, oh, well, I'm not going to murder for hire. What do you say to those people? How do you actually confront this annoying thing that the state did on purpose because it's annoying?
Right. Well, just to give a more precise background with it, it was sprung on us at the bail hearing when we were fighting for him to have bail. And we were like ambushed, our attorney didn't even know. He's like, what are you talking about? And, oh no, this murder for hire, blah, blah, blah. And it was one of the things that deprived Ross of bail, and yet 2 months later, the Southern District of New York, when they actually formally indicted him, it was nowhere to be seen. There was no murder for hire. We're like, what the heck? So never was a charge at trial. It was never ruled on by a jury. They did get to kind of talk about it, and they go, no, it was all based on anonymous chats. There was no witness ever said that it was Ross. The actual supposed victim, Curtis Green, is a supporter. He doesn't think it's Ross. He wants Ross to get out. But in any case, it never, all of that they got to talk about it to the jury as if, and they said, you don't need to rule on it. No one got murdered, but believe us, trust us. He did this. He's the one behind those anonymous chats. You can trust us. And then, but there was also there was actually a charge in Maryland where corrupt agents who are now in prison, who were at the core of the Silk Road investigation, were stealing money from the site. They provided this information to the government in Maryland and said, oh, here's these chats, these anonymous chats. This is the guy. You can charge him with murder for hire. So based on the material provided by corrupt agents who now in prison, they went, oh, well, and this. Well, those have, as you say, those have been dropped. And they've been dropped with prejudice, which means they can never bring them up again. They're done. So there's nothing in the legal system whatsoever about Ross having been involved in any kind of planned violence whatsoever, or any violence. Yet, the sentencing judge, because she issued such a draconian, unusual, and over-the-top sentence, used it in her sentencing to justify what she's doing based on something that was never determined by a jury. Well, this is an absolute violation of the Sixth Amendment of the Bill of Rights. The Sixth Amendment was written to protect the accused from rogue judges and prosecutors, from saying, oh yeah, he's guilty, believe us, and leaving it up to 12 people, supposedly of your peers. That didn't happen. This question was brought to the Supreme Court. We brought it to the Supreme Court, and they blew it off. And apparently, and I didn't know this until now, until this case, it's a problem in our country. Apparently, it's commonly done. And even Alice Johnson, who has been commuted by President Trump, she had it done to her. I've talked to other prisoners who's had it done to them. Criminal defense lawyers say, yeah. Even our lawyers are like, yeah, they do that. I'm like, what? They get away with this. And you're exactly right. They smear the person. They make them they don't have to prove anything, and they make it sound worse. So yeah, it's kind of a drumbeat sometimes, or what used to be worse, but on social media, and we constantly have to correct. And I actually think it's gotten better, but still, the media loves this stuff. And that's what happens, is the government feeds the media. And just one example that's often cited, Andy Greenberg of Wired, what he did, and I called him on it. I said, man, he published the chat as DPR and the agent, but they put a picture of Ross at the top. So they didn't say it was Ross, but it's obviously, it's propaganda. And I said, why did you do that? And he goes, well, I'm not in charge of the photos. And I'm like, well, do you think you could talk to them about it? This is wrong. But he never did. And I've run into this with the media a lot. It's a deliberate distortion. It's a propaganda tool, is what they use. And, for whatever reason, clickbait or whatever. And so there's, that's just one example.
No,
yeah.
I've even heard politicians complain about it, because not even politicians, even just businessmen, that the press will just come out with an atrocious accusation. Everyone will write about it, and then they'll be like, a month
charges
later,
are dropped or whatever.
Actually, we were wrong about that. But no one reads the wrong part. They just all remember the accusations, and then the crap's been slung, and it sticks.
Yeah. And the thing is with Ross, there's 100 letters on our website from people who actually know Ross. None of them believe it. Never did. Ross is probably one of the sweetest, most compassionate, peaceful people. He wouldn't hurt a fly. And literally, there's an anecdote a friend tells about how he saved a fly from him. He wouldn't let him kill the fly. It's like Ross would no more want to. It's just unimaginable.
Yeah.
He's just not that kind of person. And as you say, the writings show that, he's proponent of peace. And that's why the site was the non-aggression principle. It wouldn't hurt. And there were arguments from what I've read. I read chats that were on Silk Road where they were arguing, well, if it's a free market, we should be able to have child porn. We should choose what we want. And DPR said, go somewhere else. It's not happening here.
It's not happening here. And there was a big battle even with guns, because guns can actually hurt. And eventually there was no guns allowed on there either.
Right. They didn't. I don't think there's one documented gun sale and they went to another thing and then they dropped it. Yeah. Any weapons. Yeah. And actually Cross has recently written, and it's on Medium. He's got many writings on Medium. To be honest, I haven't read it because he gets really technical and I'm like, oh my God, I don't have the bandwidth for this, but my own son, terrible. But anyway, about how to get around keeping privacy, but not allowing evil to proliferate. And he's got an idea about it. I'm not even sure how it works, but and he uses child porn as an exact as a example of how you want to keep your privacy, but this ways to stop this. This is an evil thing. It can't be allowed to continue, kind of thing, if we can help it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, sorry, I'm sort of, Tatiana, I'm taking over a little bit, but I just find it so fascinating. The Silk Road was this purest place. It was the first online marketplace where people could use cryptocurrency. And so it was, but it was very purist on the non-aggression principle. And then when it got shut down, of course, hundreds now have popped up, way worse than anything you can imagine, terrifying. And of course, they can't stop it. All they've done is taken this young guy who has come from the right place to create something where people are not harming each other. And there's actually a lot of examples of people getting better off of drugs because there was support forums and such. But where now they've cut off the head of this thing back then, which was actually a tiny market, actually, compared to the huge things now. And it's really unfortunate when you get these people really vigilantly angry at this guy who made a very specifically orchestrated towards peace and towards nonviolence a marketplace. And now you've just got rogue everything. And if they didn't, people would have stayed there, and it would have stayed this place of nonviolence. I mean, competition would have arisen, but I think it's kind of like Bitcoin as well. I see that as well. If they ban Bitcoin, then Monero or something with way more privacy comes, way more things stacked on to protect people come in. And I don't know where I'm going with that rant, but
no, I think it's a good point. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good point.
So I want to bring it back to what was the punishment, right? Because Josh is talking about all these other people. Ross was given a very harsh punishment, double life plus 40 years. And then you have the juxtaposition with the corrupt government agents who should be getting out any day now if Ross has been in jail for about 7 years. Can you talk a little bit about how that was treated? And then I'd love to talk a little bit about how the drug war, maybe this was a little bit of something where they didn't like the competition. But before we go into the competition aspect, right, let's talk about who was on this case and why were they so corrupt? Isn't that defeat the purpose of having a government body, is for them to not be crooks?
Oh yeah, I mean they're in prison, and I think there was another agent too, because it came out after trial that someone was selling DPR information from the inside, and that's all documented. But the testimony, the evidence was cut off for trial. But then after trial, it was discovered by the defense team a whole nother folder which had the complete information. And this guy was an inside agent feeding information to DPR for money being paid. Very important stuff that is gone now. And also at that same time, there's proof that DPR logged into the Silk Road Forum from the DPR account when Ross had already been in prison 7 weeks. So it's pretty obvious that there was someone else. And what happened with the missing evidence is that it shows it was tampered with. The evidence was tampered with, and we have proof of that. But it's too late. The trial's over. So point being is that there's other corruption involved, not just the two that everybody knows about. There's a lot of money. It wasn't $1 billion like often the media will say, because that's 1,000 million. But apparently, with all the legal products and everything, the government says it was 183 million. So but that counts legal, drugs, everything. The media loves to say $1 billion, over $1 billion, and it's just not true. But anyway, the sentence was, it's a violation of the Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment. It's very unusual. It's extremely cruel. But they said they wanted to make him an example, that they wanted him to be a deterrent. Of course, it wasn't, like Josh pointed out. Even right after the sentencing, all these other sites proliferated. There was a copycat site, Silk Road 2, that was actually, according to the government itself, bigger, sold more drugs in a month. And I don't know that it had these restrictions that Silk Road did. And that guy, the guy running it, Blake Benthall, he never got any prison time at all. He kind of disappeared out of the system. And then Vice uncovered something about he's only has to pay back taxes. And then that kind of, the guy's gone. He's disappeared. And, and then here's Ross with double life plus 40 years. And for essentially the same crime. And that goes right against the Sentencing Reform Act, which says the same crime gets relatively the same punishment. I mean, there's so many violations of the Constitution in this case. But,
Well,
yeah.
actually, so about all these violations to the Constitution, people are listening to this and they're saying, okay, there's corrupt agents, there's tampering with evidence. He obviously can't log in if he's the only drug buyer Roberts if he's in jail. What now? What can't we just, appeal it, go to this, Supreme Court? But that's not how it works, because you guys tried and then they didn't accept it. So most people don't have experience with what happens when something goes to the Supreme Court. So now that that's happened, can you explain a little bit of the, not really ending, but the next phases of what happens once you realize all this corruption is going on and the sentencing happens?
Yeah, well, the Supreme Court really only takes cases that affect a universal group. They're not going to get into the weeds of a case. They just don't do that. So the two issues that were brought up to them were very important. And it's really terrible that they didn't address them for all of us. One is the one I already told about, the Sixth Amendment, where, you have to have a jury of your peers rule on you. If you don't, it's undermining the whole trial by jury foundation of our justice system, which is pretty well shattered as far as I can tell. And then the other was a Fourth Amendment issue, which was based on the third party doctrine, which is an antiquated ruling from 4 decades ago based on the dial telephone, which basically says without a warrant, the government can find out a number you dialed. That's it. They've used that now to expand that to be that the government can go into any of our phones or laptops without a warrant, without probable cause, with no oversight, in secret, scarf up whatever they want in secret, and it's all okay because the third party doctrine said they could get a phone number 4 decades ago. This is, because obviously they have technology our phones are a little different. They're little computers. And so all this relevant information is on our phones and laptops. I mean, religious affiliation, political persuasions, sexual orientation, medical records, apps, etc. And they can use it to blackmail people. They can use it to pursue political enemies, all in secret. And and this was a case, ours was a case where they could have stopped this. They could have brought it up to speed with technology. Nope, didn't want to touch it. So they have left us vulnerable with no Fourth Amendment protections in the digital age. So, but see, the thing is with the Supreme Court is, if they say no, that's no. You don't get to go back and go, well, what about this? You don't get to do that. So now we're left with, we've exhausted all direct appeals to the courts. And I'm left with a big disillusionment about our justice system and our court system. I'm almost like, good, we're out of the courts. I can't deal with, I don't expect justice. I don't. It's terrible to say, but I don't. I hate to say it.
So unfortunate.
And so now, well, actually we are in a court. I take it back. And it's a civil, I believe it's actually strictly a civil situation where it's a last Hail Mary, where in the back to the good old Southern District of New York, we have something that's called a 2255 or a habeas petition. Very rarely do you win them. And in fact, the same sentencing judge, Catherine Forrest, was going to be presiding, which I'm like, what's the point? Except that she, luckily for justice everywhere, has retired. And so there's another judge from the Southern District over it. And basically it's based on, well, there's new evidence, or the lawyer was insufficient, or something where we deserve another look. We'll see what happens. Things have slowed down quite a bit because of COVID, but that's in the works. And then, and the other option, the only other option, is a clemency from the president. That's it. That's why we've been working hard to get this petition. As you mentioned, it's approaching 350,000 people. Yeah, my goal is 500,000.
I think we can
Please,
get there. If people
yeah,
are
we can get
listening
there.
right now, they can sign it. They can go to change.org and just look up Ross's name, or go to freeross.org.
.org. There's a big banner right there, and you don't have to be American. It's a worldwide effort. It's really a grassroots effort, and really, it's a. If people go, well, that doesn't guarantee anything. I'm like, I know it doesn't, but what it does is it gives me a tool to go to legislators and others and say, this many people are behind this. This is not just some fly-by-night thing. This is a movement, and it's like, this is important to a lot of people. And here's the petition. It's proof. And we also have, people who matter, and people who matter, what I mean, is like they're known, but everybody matters. But, it's like other people too, writing letters to the president saying, this isn't right, and why. And so we're working on many angles to try to convince the president that this is the right thing to do, that this sentence is wrong. It sets a terrible precedent for others, excessive sentencing, and that it needs to be corrected. It's a very bad thing in the law.
Yeah, and you actually have a lot of bipartisan support. You've had a lot of different people come out in support of you. We had a recent episode with Joe Jorgensen, who's the presidential candidate, along with Spike Cohen, the vice presidential candidate from the Libertarian Party. But
They
I
wrote
think that
they wrote a letter, for example. Yeah.
Well, certainly, but they're not the only people that have come out in support of Ross. So it's very good to see that kind of thing going on. Now, I've also been friends with Ross now for a while. I got to be one of the few people that got to visit with him. And I was really impressed with, just how strong and how brave he is in the face of such adversity. And a lot of people say, oh, you're going to be brave in the face of adversity and blah, 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 and, have courage. But, he's actually also been able to really keep his heart open. He does a lot of different meditation. He has a huge capacity for forgiveness. He's obviously written a lot of things that I find very inspirational. He even drew me this beautiful drawing of myself, and he gave it to me for my birthday. I used it as the album cover because I did a song for people who are listening called The Silk Road, because I wanted to bring attention to the case, but he's also got a creative soul. Tell me a little bit more about how he's coping under such circumstances, because I think that that's always been very inspirational for people. Obviously, there's a lot of bad news. There's some action items. People can sign the petition. They can reach out with any kind of contacts that they have. But tell us about what it's like for Ross. We've all been, on lockdown for months. What's it like for Ross to be on lockdown right now?
Yeah, let me just say, the song you wrote was so beautiful. It makes me cry every time. Every time I hear it, it's so beautiful, and it still inspires me. And the friendship of you, Tatiana, and Josh, and so many others around the world has made so much difference to me personally, because it keeps me going, and to Ross. It really does, because you can really feel alone when you're locked away, basically, literally in a cage. And yeah, he's very artistic. There's a couple of posters on our store, on our website, of drawings he's done. And yeah, he's always been very artistic. He also, on his Twitter, he's posted drawings, and he's also a writer, and he's been writing. He has a whole collection. They're on our website and also on Medium. And yeah, there's the technical ones that I have a hard time understanding, but then there's the real human ones like you talked about. And it does show how brave he is. He's amazingly courageous in the face of this, much more than I would be. And one of them, you mentioned forgiveness. One of them is called The 5 Keys to Inner Strength. I learned in 5 years in prison. And he goes down these different keys. And one of them is forgiveness. And he won't let me. Sometimes I'm like expressing my feelings about certain judges and things. And he's like, no, we're not going to go there. That's not, those individuals aren't important. We're talking about a bigger thing here. And we don't need to waste our energy being bitter. And there's so many people in prison who are bitter. They're devoured by bitterness because of their situation and what's happened. And or else they'll dull things by watching TV constantly or doing drugs or whatever it is. And Ross is really intentional about using his time uh, constructively. So he's been writing, he's been drawing, he's been reading, he does all of that, and is using it as a way to grow mentally and spiritually. And so he meditates. He writes about this on his Twitter, Real Ross U. But so he's really inspirational how he's coping with it, and he's just not changing. It's not like I think a lot of people in there get hardened, they change, they're not who they are. Ross is still him. When I visit him, we laugh about things, we have great conversations. He's he's still himself. And of course it's not like this hasn't impacted him. Of course it has. But in some ways, I think it's made him, because of what he's seen and experienced, he wants to work for criminal justice reform when he gets out. He wants to help others. That's Ross, and so what he's seen and the people he knows in prison now, he will work for them, and I will too. I mean, this situation it cannot stand in America. This is wrong.
It's certainly emblematic of a larger systematic problem within the criminal justice system. But, Ross's story has captivated so many people around the world. You have these kind of hit piece books. There was that Nick Bilton book that was just riddled with inaccuracies and just outright lies. People want to know what's going on with Ross, but we've never really gotten a chance to see the man behind the mask, so to speak, because all we can get are these writings. And you've had a very unique story. Do you think that with the way that Hollywood is right now, we'll ever get to hear Ross's side of the story and maybe, tell that part? Because does that affect his outcome of any kind of future from, the prison system? Would it, prevent him from getting out? Like, how can we know his story when it's been so misrepresented?
Referencing that book real quick, I was told that author wanted me involved. He emailed me, kind of caught me in the courtroom and grabbed me and said, "Hey, he really wanted me involved." And I was warned by someone who I very much trust, said, don't get involved in that. This is going to be the government narrative all the way. And in fact, they've been fed the story from the government. He was fed before trial. He's been working on this based on the government narrative. So if you want to read the government narrative, yeah, it's cool. But, and I'm, anyway, that's the thing behind that. And I didn't get involved with it at all. So as far as Ross's story, I believe he's writing in there. And I'm sure part of why he wanted the Twitter was so he could speak, because everyone's talking for him and who he is. And no, he never got to speak himself. And, obviously it's not going into details about his entire story, like his autobiography, but you can get a real sense of who he is.
By the way, he's not got access to a phone in there and tweeting. He's actually passing messages out through
He's writing letters with what he wants to say. Yeah,
he has no internet, and he supposedly never will ever again, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're trying, not internet. No prisoner has actual internet, but they do have a system in the prison that allows emails, and they won't even let him do that. They think he's going to hack into it and fly away or something. I don't know what they think. But he has tried to get it, because it's really a hardship not to have email. But, and now I don't know, might keep trying. I don't know. The Bureau of Prisons turned him down, because it's an internet crime or whatever. And so he doesn't have that. and he's still managing to write all this stuff about Bitcoin and all this stuff. So
Yeah.
gets articles
Amazing.
mailed to him and things. But as far as I don't know, Tatiana. I mean, I would imagine that the first step, I mean, I'm going to write a book too about my journey, which is a totally other journey that's pretty unbelievable, frankly. But I probably would wait till I have a happy ending to write it. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, that's a
But
good place
I'm
to.
optimistic for a happy ending. I am. I'm optimistic that with the kind of support we have, with the crazy things in this case, how wrong it is, and this sentence, that I just think I am optimistic that, and hopefully sooner than later, because Ross's life is ticking away and he's so much to give, but eventually I just can't conceive that he will die in there. I just can't conceive of it. I really can't. So
Yeah.
I just keep hopeful and moving forward day by day.
Well, he
That's
certainly has our support. And
Oh,
so as we wrap
yes.
up the show, I certainly want people to go to freeross.org and find out more information. Josh, it sounds like you had a question. We're coming up on the hour, but quickly go for it.
No, it was more of a statement that you mentioned it before, that there was multiple DPRs and that guy logged in. And I just want people to, because this is another thing I constantly get, is he was the only one. But the
No,
voice
of course.
changed over time with what I was reading. But also, you got to think about it. These are people about decentralization. These are people obsessed. The early Bitcoins obsessed with decentralization. Someone isn't going to start something like that and then have it centralized. It's all about, okay, how can I, and even the moniker of Dread Pirate Roberts was all about, you never know. One dead pirate could die and another one is there. It's just, it's this thing. So remember, there wasn't just one DPR. It was a network. And it's unfortunate that he's had to take the rap for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone should have taken the rap because it was, just such a, it saved lives. It saves lives.
Mm-hmm.
It really did.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know if I have time to say, but real quick, there were people who were getting CBD for their child's life-threatening seizures. I was told this by Kevin McKiernan, and they couldn't get it anymore. Things like that. It was what people wanted to exchange, as long as it didn't hurt a third party. It wasn't a drug site that that's all there was at all.
Yeah.
And listen, anyone listening here wants to find out more, just go to freeross.org, because it's our hub. It's very dense. You can follow footnotes all into all kinds of rabbit holes on there and find all kinds of information. And we have a whole overview that's either a video, a podcast, or you could read it, that's based on the public record, and it's riveting itself. But please help us. We need help. We need the petition to grow to 500,000. We need, if you have political connections at all, even not necessarily right to the White House, but people who might know someone, please get in touch with me. We need to convince President Trump that this is a worthy thing to do. And then we have an action page. You can go, and there's other suggestions, and you can always get a hold of me. Of course, we have a donate page. You can, we have all of those ways to help. And you can always get a hold of me from the website. And just please, if you're at all, write Ross a letter if you want. But please, if you're so moved, please help us. And if you're made much money off of Bitcoin, you can thank Ross, really, for his vision. And any help you can give would be really, really good.
Well said.
Thank you so much, Lyn, for joining us on the Tatiana Show. You guys can check out this episode. And please make sure that you subscribe to all of our channels. We'll see you next time. Josh, any final words from Voltoro?
Just check us out. We're about to launch the affiliate program this week. So that's very exciting.
All right. Well, we'll talk about it next week. So yeah, tune in, guys, on Tuesdays. Thanks for tuning in. Once again, Lyn Ulbricht, an inspiration to us all, and beacon of light for Ross. All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye.
Lyn.
Peace out.
Thank you.
What's the point of all this technology without a little love in our lives? Our hosts, Tatiana Moroz, Dr. Stephanie Murphy, and Lauren Kasovitz, have come together to bring you Proof of Love. Go to proofoflovecast.com. The Tatiana Show has been brought to you by CryptoMediaHub.com, a boutique marketing and PR agency for Bitcoin and beyond. the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. We gotta think and reflect and use lots of intellect with our hearts when we work together. I know that it can be so hard out there, looking all around and saying that life ain't fair. So that is why we will fight and stay up late at night, listening to the Tatiana Show. Thank you for listening to the Tatiana Show. Please follow us on Twitter at Queen Tatiana or on Facebook and Instagram at Tatiana Moroz Music. More episodes can be found at thetatianashow.com, and make sure you leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends. You are listening to The Tatiana Show. This show may contain adult content, language, and humor and is intended for mature audiences. If that's not you, please stop listening. Nothing you hear on The Tatiana Show is intended as financial advice, legal advice, or really anything other than entertainment. Take everything you hear with a grain of salt. Oh, and if you're listening to us on an affiliate network, the ideas and views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the network that you're listening on or of any sponsors or any affiliate products you may hear about on this show.